Well, welcome. I'm so glad you all could make it. Welcome to the first Grants and Funding webinar for MI2. This is just going to be how grants and funding can help metals company basic overview. So I'm excited you all are here. I wanted to show you guys just how much federal money is coming down the pipeline right now. It's pretty unprecedented, pretty amazing. Like, I can't even fathom $1 trillion. It's like a million millions. Like, it's so many zeros, my brain can't handle it. And as a grant writer in the past, it was like, if I could get a $50,000 grant for an organization, it was like, wow, that's great. Those are rare. And now there's $1 million grants, $20 million grants, $50 million grants. So today, we're going to be talking about ways that metals companies can benefit from all the grants and funding that are coming down the pipeline. And I wanted to start off with a story, though. One of my favorite mentors is out in Eastern Kentucky, and he grew up financially poor but rich in all kinds of other ways. And he said that his dad really wanted to leave a legacy for his family. And so he started a coal mining company, and it started doing pretty well. And then the coal downturn came, and all these coal companies were closing down, losing all their business. And they would come to him and they'd ask, how do you keep having all this work while we can't find any? And he just replied, while you's asleep and I's a creeping. And that always just made me laugh. It was so funny to think, okay, if we are sleeping through all of this federal money and sleeping through all these things that are coming on the pipeline, then other people are going to get it. Just like he was able to get those projects and contracts, and other people weren't. So I just really hope that this webinar inspires you to see that there is a lot of federal money out there, and that we can, as a group, as an organization, and just you all as metals and manufacturing companies individually, we can really start taking advantage of these opportunities and not just sleep through all these funding opportunities that could end very soon. So this presentation will be available afterwards, and there's these great links that can teach you more about each of these different federal opportunities. But we're just going to do an overview today. So today we're going to talk about what's in it for metals companies, why apply for federal funding, types of grants and funding, the typical grant process that you can expect, and how you can avoid some common pitfalls, and then some resources that MI2 can help you with. So just a little bit about me. I'm the MI2 Grants and Funding Consultant. I own Vision Granted, and I'm based in Eastern Kentucky. So I'm a grant writer, a project manager, and a bureaucracy navigator. I have my master's in communication, and I'm a certified PMP project management professional. One of the main things that I love to do is I like to help organizations that are new to grants and funding navigate through all those complicated processes so they can plan their projects well, they can find the funding, and they can really develop competitive proposals. So since 2020, when everything seemed to change and all this federal funding started to come down the pipeline, this has been the impact, as I've been able to help over 20 different lead applicant organizations apply for 66 grants with an 80% success rate and over 26 million awarded since 2020. So I hope you guys have your phones or some way to do a Menti. If you go to menti.com and type in that code, or if you scan that QR code with your phone, you should be able to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and start the Menti, and I just like to learn who's joining us. So if you just tell us what's your role or your type of organization, and you can pick more than one if you represent more than one of these, but if you could go ahead and scan that QR code and fill that out, we'd like to know who's here with us. Great. Looking like we've got quite a variety of folks then. Oh, good. Got a little bit of representation of almost everybody. I'm glad there's some partners out there too, and especially metals companies. Even got an entrepreneur. That's awesome. All right, I'll go ahead and go on to the next one. Next is a Menti 2. This is great. Good diversity of folks. So the next one is, I want to know your experience. What types of grants or funding have you applied for? You can check all that apply. So if you've applied for federal grants, state grants, there's other types of grants that are like from foundations or professional organizations, federal tax credits or incentives, or state tax credits or incentives. There's low interest or forgivable loans, loan guarantees, or something else, or none of these. I know grants and federal funding can be new to a lot of folks, so it seemed like there are going to be a lot of people who are pretty new to grants and funding on this webinar, and just wanted to make sure I'm talking to the right folks. So if you just scan that QR code or you go to minty.com and use that code up there, you'll be able to answer it. All right, not many people have applied for many grants, so I'll go ahead and move to the next one. Okay, I'd really like to know your opinion. So what are the most challenging aspects of applying for or managing a grant or funding? And you can write up to 3 things. And it can be things that you've heard other people say or things that you've experienced. Just let us know how you feel about that. What are the most challenging aspects of applying for or managing a grant? Well, it looks like this one's having a little trouble, so we'll just go ahead and move forward. We've done a lot of research, and so I think we know, but we would like to hear from you guys about that. So there's lots of pros and cons to government money, and I was hoping to hear from you guys what you thought they were, but we'll go ahead and just kind of go over a few of them. Basically, some of the drawbacks are just that government money is so slow. It's like they run at a completely different speed from businesses. Businesses kind of move at the speed of light, and government's like the speed of molasses. It's just if you think that a grant is going to be awarded in a few months, it might take a year. So sometimes things can just be very slow. And the other thing is just that there's a steep learning curve. A lot of times government funding and grants, they use different jargon and acronyms, and it's just kind of hard to navigate the language. And then also they're just time consuming. There's often a lot of bureaucracy and red tape, but there's a lot of benefits too. I mean, there's the obvious benefit of if you want to collaborate on something that you can't do alone, then it's a great way to find new solutions to really difficult problems and find new innovations. There's also, of course, financial advantages. It can definitely help your bottom line. And then it also helps to de-risk innovation. So when projects are really costly, it can really help you to make them happen when they wouldn't otherwise. Uh, it's a great time to look for it then. Another, sorry, it seems like my mic keeps getting muted. So when you can't do it on your own, that's a really good time to do it.
Looks like you're muted again, Ruthie.
Sorry, it keeps muting me automatically every few seconds. Okay, I'll try not to make that happen. Uh, good grief, this is wild. Okay, thanks for letting me know, Sam. Please let me know if I get muted again. So yeah, if you found a partner who'll manage it for you, that's a wonderful scenario. It is very time consuming and difficult to have to manage federal grants and funding. So finding someone who can apply for and manage it for you, like a nonprofit or a government agency, is wonderful. All right, so let's go to the next section. So what's in it for metals companies then? So let's try the Minty one more time. If you can go ahead and scan the QR code or put that code in at minty.com. Let's do a ranking. So what are the top challenges or opportunities that metals and manufacturing companies in Kentucky need to fund right now? So some of the things that we found through research with MI2 is lots of folks are looking for talent, recruitment, workforce development. They're looking for research and development with innovation. They're looking for construction like site expansion and getting utilities and rail. Great. And then sustainability is a big one too with green energy. Awesome. Okay, it's looking like these are pretty even then. I'll give you guys a few more seconds to finish up. So it looks like talent is the number one, and then sustainability followed by R&D and construction. Great, that's really good to know. A lot of the grants we're going to go over today are for talent and sustainability. So this is awesome. So remember I showed you this slide earlier, and you can kind of delve into these if you want later. There's really good links here that help explain a little bit more. But let's talk about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act a little bit. There's $550 billion in federal funding. And here's a nice breakdown of the transportation part of it. And especially since metals companies help provide a lot of the materials needed for roads and bridges and things, this is really important. So it also has a lot of money for freight rail, which can help with logistics, electric vehicles, airports, all kinds of things that metals companies could get involved with. And this is a nice breakdown of just the different types of government agencies that have some of this funding. You can see Department of Transportation has $274 billion. A lot of this is competitive grants. Some are also loans. And then here's the CHIPS and Science Act. It has $278 billion of federal funding. You can see a nice breakdown there of National Science Foundation, U.S. Department of Energy tends to have the most. And this is really focused on innovation like science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM programs, as well as workforce development and R&D. And then the next one is the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. There's $390 billion federal funding, mainly for energy and climate change reduction. So between this one and that one, hearing that talent and energy and sustainability are really needing funding, it sounds like there's a whole lot of funding out there for projects right now. You can see the breakdown that there's almost half of the funding that's available is tax incentives for corporations. So that's really exciting that you all be able to access those. And quite a bit of it is also for federal grants. You can see most of it is for energy projects, as well as quite a bit, $47.7 billion for manufacturing, as well as some for the environment. And then on the right side, you'll see a clean energy funding breakdown, and you'll see that a lot of it's for renewable energy sources and zero emissions. A lot of it is for carbon capture, and you'll see manufacturing in there as well. So there's tons of ways that metals companies can benefit from these types of funding. Okay, so there's lots of trending funding needs for metals companies like you all just showed. And I wanted to show you here how many of the funding needs are also can be filled by federal funding, trending topics right now, things that the federal government's really trying to fund. And you'll see advanced manufacturing across the board. They're really wanting to onshore different types of manufacturing facilities. And so they're investing really hard in advanced manufacturing, especially for critical infrastructure, which includes metals companies. And you'll see a lot for workforce development, a lot for innovation with STEM, as well as semiconductors. There's a lot for site expansion, especially if it has to do with economic development in rural or disadvantaged communities, and green energy and sustainability in general, just to reduce greenhouse gases. Also, recycling is a big topic, and manufacturing renewables. So here's another trending topic. And one interesting thing about Kentucky is that you'll see a lot of green on the left and right side of this map of Kentucky. And what those are energy communities, communities that have been primarily responsible for helping produce electricity for America. And many of those are former coal companies as well as other types of energy communities. And the government has started the interagency working group on coal and power plant communities and economic revitalization. You can go to that link right there. And they're offering tons of tax credits and incentives, as well as just additional funding for grants that you wouldn't normally be able to apply for. So definitely look into that if you're planning on serving any of those communities that are an energy community. There's also the Made in America requirement for federal funds. So there's this presidential executive order that was signed in 2021, and it created the Made in America office. And basically, federal funds are always supposed to do their best to purchase things in America, and they have to go through an entire waiver process if they aren't going to do that. So this is really good for metals companies because there's going to be $600 billion of federal government contracts. And so that can be a huge thing that you all can be trying to get federal contracts. Just make sure that you're registered on sam.gov. And sam.gov is also important to stay registered with every year to be able to get federal grants as well. This is also a great way for you to be able to market to winners so that you can get some of the grant funding as well, just as the contractors for it, and just also all the grant funding that's coming down the pipeline for metals companies. So I wanted to show you an example of the spend out of some of these funds. So this is just the CHIPS and Science Act, but as you'll see, it really grows by about 2026 and then it starts tapering off. And a lot of that's because many of these grants are for like 3 years, maybe 4 years. And so you'll see that they're going to stop accepting applications probably around 27 or 28. So we really just have a few years to really grasp this funding while we can before it starts tapering off. And this really is a once in a generation type of federal funding opportunity. I've never seen anything like this before. So just remember that some applications will only be accepted for a few years, and then the window of opportunity is closing. I don't know if you guys have met Leland Lorenzen. He is MI2's Chief Financial Officer. And as I was talking to him about grants, he said, we got to anticipate and then participate. And we're like, man, that has to be our new federal funding mantra. We've got to get our projects ready so that we can participate in these grant funding opportunities when they come out. Because a lot of times when they're announced, you only have 2 or 3 months to get a grant application ready. So it's really important to have the team already together, the project already planned, and we're just ready to stick it all into that grant application and get the funding. So I'm going to tell you about some different types of grants and funding now. I'm going to focus on 3 different ones that really help metals companies, and those are grants, tax credits and incentives, and then special financing. So here's another Mentee. Choose a project your organization needs funding for right now, and I'm hoping you can just put a few words in here describing it. It could be something really short like workforce development or carbon sequestration or however you whatever you want to write in there. But I'd really like to get an idea of the main project you're focused on right now, so that as we're going through this, you'll be able to figure out what types of grants and funding we discussed could really help you. Okay, workforce development, expansion funding, recycling. Workforce participation. Yeah, definitely seeing lots of workforce. I'm so excited to see these things because there's funding available. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds to type something in. Rail. Yeah, I've heard a lot of folks needing rail infrastructure. Sustainability. Great. Okay, well, I'm gonna hit a little bit on all of these actually. So that's great. Thank you guys. So if you could either pull out a pen and paper, or maybe you could type in the chat, or however you want to do it, I really encourage you as you start learning different types of grants and funding and how to access those, write these things down or go ahead and share them in the chat. And there'll be a few times when I have a question in a yellow box and you can just answer that for yourself or put it in the chat. So the question now is, what have you learned so far that can help your project gain government funding? And as we talk about funding, I really thought it was important to talk about the return on investment and why different investors fund different things. And so a lot of people don't think of, grant sponsors as an investor, but that's exactly what they are. And if you look at the left side of the spectrum of financial return, you'll see that grant investors are not interested in a financial return. They're interested in a return on their investment being impact. So in fact, if you gave them back their grant, they're going to be very upset with you. They don't want the money back. They want to have an impact. They want to see something change in their community, a very specific thing. So if you look on the left, you'll see grants, and all the way to the right is when the investors are more interested in a financial return on their investment. So will your project create a social impact or a financial return on investment is the question. Where do you think you fit along this scale? Who may be interested in funding or financing your project? So you really have to think about what types of organizations would be interested, whether it's folks who want to make money off of it, investing all the way on the right, or it's people who want to really see a change in society. And it sounds like, since a lot of you guys are working on workforce and sustainability issues, that there should be a lot of grant funding out there that's wanting to have an impact in those areas. So it might be the Department of Energy, it might be the Department of, or the Economic Development Administration. There's different types of the federal government who would be more interested because of different impacts that you could have. So let's do an overview of grants first. So grants are money that is given that is not intended to be paid back. I want to emphasize that it's not free money. A lot of folks immediately, whenever I say I'm a grant writer, they're like, oh, you help people get free money. No, grants are, they always have, there's always a catch. And usually that is that they want to see the impact. So you have to do something for that money. Typically an impact might be, the number of miles of railroad infrastructure that was constructed, how many jobs were created, how many people gained jobs that had a good salary, that kind of a thing. And then grant sponsors are typically government agencies. It could be like a foundation, like a philanthropic organization, a corporation, or sometimes even just a wealthy individual or family. So I'm going to go through a few different examples of grants for each of these. And so this is a 2-page summary that we developed with MI2, and we have quite a few grants now that have this. And this is just a way for you to get a glimpse into what the grant or funding opportunity is like, because a lot of times they'll have like hundreds of pages of guidance or something like that. And so you don't want to have to read through all of that just to see if it might be a good fit for you. So this is a good example of a grant that could help with talent and workforce. And you'll see that right up front, it's got the name of the grant, who the sponsor is, and then what's in it for metals company. So right away, I might have some ideas that are there that the grant could be used for. For instance, this one is the Rural Innovations Stronger Economy, or the U.S. Department of Agriculture RISE grant. And it's all about how to get different high-wage jobs in eligible low-income areas. So they really want to work with industry and accelerate business and industry clusters. So it's a really, really good opportunity for metals companies to get together and solve some workforce challenges. So I'd say if the talent and workforce group could start developing a project and get ready to apply for this grant. It's currently closed, but it's usually an annual grant. So, I mean, this one could be open probably this spring. And it might even be awarded by September. So that'd be pretty cool to get some really awesome talent and workforce projects started. It's usually for $500,000 to $2 million and up to 4 years. So this is what a 2-page summary looks like. You'll see it has the grant amount, the deadlines, a description of it, who's eligible. So you'll see in here that a corporation is not eligible. So a single metals company would not apply, but a nonprofit could apply and be the main lead, or an organization that is a local government or a state government or higher education could also apply. So here's one section, cost share requirements. That might sound like really foreign language to a lot of people, but it's basically just how much of the total project that the grant is willing to fund. So you'll see in this one that they're only willing to fund 80% of the project, and you have to find 20% to be matching funds or to share the cost of it. So basically, if you're applying for $1 million and they're only willing to fund 80%, then you would ask them for 800,000 and you'd have to find 200,000 yourself as the cost share. Then it has the dates of performance, so you know how long the grant is, what you're allowed to use the funds for, what you're not allowed to use the funds for, and then some links to help you learn more about it if you're interested in it. So here's a grant example for innovation. This one is for the National Science Foundation's Industry University Cooperative Research Center program. And what this could be used for is to create some sort of center for metals innovation in Kentucky. And so a metals company could not be the lead. It would have to be a university or a cluster of universities. But this could be a really cool opportunity for Kentucky to become a leader in metals innovation and for this center to be able to help researchers and entrepreneurs and metals industry corporations to all work together to solve really difficult problems that everyone's experiencing together. So you'll see that it's $20,000 if we want to just start with a planning grant, and then it goes up from there of how much you can ask for each year until the goal is for eventually the center to be self-sustainable. And then they could have equipment and things there as well that would help them to do research. It could just really be a great thing to help metals companies innovate in Kentucky. So that is one example for innovation. And here's an example for site expansion and construction. I wanted to share this opportunity because it's a very common opportunity to have along with a lot of other grants for really big projects. And so this can fund construction. It can also fund programs like workforce development programs or innovation programs, but it's basically from the Economic Development Administration, and it's called Economic Adjustment Assistance. And this is a grant that's pretty much always open until they run out of funding, until they get more funding the next time. So there's not usually a specific deadline, but usually the sooner you can talk to a program officer and then learn if it's a good fit and apply, the better. But basically, this grant can help with potentially being part of helping with construction. So if you wanted it for construction, let's say you want a new site, a metals company cannot apply, but they could work with a local government agency or a nonprofit who could. And so let's say you're wanting to build a site in an economically distressed area in Kentucky. Well, it can be really expensive to build a whole site and get rail and roads and bridges there and things. So sometimes partner with local government so that they can go ahead and get lots of different grant funds, which could include this grant, to help get everything ready for the company to go in there. And then the company can just lease it, and that can really reduce the amount of capital they have to raise to get it started. So this would definitely be worth investigating, starting a partnership with a local government or an area development district to get that started. And here's an example of green energy and sustainability. This is a new grant that just came out a couple weeks ago. It is with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and it's their Environmental and Climate Justice Community Change Grants Program. And this is quite a big grant for what they usually give. The larger one is for 10 to 20 million. And this can be used for a lot of different things, but mainly they're really wanting companies and organizations to work together to help communities that have been really hurt by a poor economy, by pollution, things like that. And so one example of something this might be able to be used for would be if MI2 folks wanted to start some sort of plan for recycling, like a statewide recycling plan to help reduce metals that could be recycled that are going to the landfills. There's lots of different potential uses for this, but this is one that would definitely be worth getting a lot of partners together to discuss if this might be a good use of MI2's brain power to apply for this. And then another trending one is small businesses. So you can actually, there's some links here you can click to see if you are a small business. You'd be surprised the businesses that do qualify as small businesses. And if they're located in a rural area, then this can help pay grants and some loans, guaranteed loans, to help lower your energy costs, make energy efficiency improvements, and even purchase new energy efficient equipment. So that's a really helpful one. So as a question, just think, could any of the grants that were just shared so far help fund your project? All right, and now we're going to go into tax credits and incentives. So tax credits typically refer to an amount of money that taxpayers can subtract directly from the taxes that they owe. And then incentives may not always be money, but usually it is. But that is just used to encourage a certain type of behavior, such as hiring a certain type of people or making sure that people are paid a certain living wage and just creating jobs in disadvantaged communities. So you can click on these if you get the presentation after this, but I'm going to go real quick through some of these, but these are some federal examples. So there's opportunity zones, and basically there are certain communities throughout America that have been designated as opportunity zones. And so if you end up, if you're going to build a site out there or invest in some sort of commercial or industrial property, then you might be able to get a 15% reduction in your capital gains tax. Another one is advanced energy project tax credit. And that's also a federal one. It's for up to a 6% tax credit. And it's one of the things it can be used for is re-equipping an industrial or manufacturing facility with equipment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 20%. So I thought you guys might be really interested in that one. And then there's the advanced manufacturing production tax credit. It provides a tax credit for domestic manufacturing, especially if you're going to be manufacturing battery components or critical minerals. And the last one is energy community tax credit bonus. And so what this is that if you're doing any of these things that could get you a tax credit in a community that's one of those energy communities where I showed you that map that had the green on the right and the left of Kentucky, then you can qualify for up to a 10% increase in your tax credit. So if you're already doing work in those types of places and maybe you're doing things that could create jobs or helping with energy efficiency, you might be eligible for an extra 10% tax credit. So definitely look into that. Okay, the next one is examples of state of Kentucky tax credits and incentives. This is a new one. You might have heard of this one, but it's the Kentucky Employee Child Care Assistance Partnership, and it's a pilot program. It's a great way to potentially double the amount of assistance that you give for childcare to your employees. So it's basically an employer match program. So if you give $200, then you apply for this program and get accepted, you might be able to get $200 extra a month for one of your employees to help pay for their childcare, which is great for retention. The next is the Bluegrass State Skills Corporation Skills Training Investment Credit. A lot of times it's referred to as STIP. And this is an income tax credit for companies. And some of the eligible companies, out of all of them, manufacturing is included. And it helps offset the cost of training programs. There's also Kentucky Business Incentive Program, and this can also help with training your employees. And if you're going to be hiring at least 10 full-time people, then you can apply for a state income tax incentive as well, as long as they're earning 150% of the federal minimum wage, which I think is like $10.50 an hour or something like that. And then the Kentucky Enterprise Initiative Act is also a really good one that can help with activities for manufacturing companies. So like if you are constructing a new site or something like that, or adding new equipment, they might be able to refund some of your sales and use tax that you paid. So those are some of the tax incentives and tax incentives and tax credits that you can look forward to. And I want to talk about some special financing options. So if you look at that spectrum of financial return, you'll see right here the forgivable loan, repaying just the principal, and the submarket return. So I wanted to go into that a little bit. So special financing, it supports investment projects that would not otherwise provide enough of a rate of return for the investors to make it compensate for the risk. So an example would be reduced rate loans. So loans that have a smaller interest rate, especially in disadvantaged communities, there's lots of government programs that can help with that. Also forgivable loans. This is typically loans that you have to pay back unless you meet all of the terms or you actually hit all the goals for your impact. And so whatever those terms are, like maybe it's creating 50 jobs, however that is, once you hit that, then they can forgive the loan. And then there's also loan guarantees, and that's kind of like a cosigner. It's kind of like someone guaranteeing that, yes, we will make sure that this gets repaid. It's really good for if you're working on a big project that's too risky for traditional banks. So here's some examples of that. Department of Energy has been really getting into a lot of these lately. There's the low-cost loan for energy reinvestment. And this also is specifically for energy communities, and they're really trying to help organizations go into these energy communities and start doing manufacturing and things that will help with reducing pollution and get jobs back into those areas. And a lot of these projects are really big. I mean, 10 million, 100 million, those are very, very common numbers. Innovative Clean Energy Loan Guarantee and Financing is another one. This is to support clean energy projects and energy infrastructure. They're really wanting to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. And then the last one is the Innovative Supply Chain Financing. And this includes any organizations that are manufacturing steel, iron, or aluminum that's low carbon. Okay, so let's go through the grant process then. Here's a typical grants process. It's very similar to a normal project management timeline. You'll see conception, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and the closeout. So I'm going to mention a few things that have really helped the grants that I've applied for be successful that typical grant writers don't always do. So I hope this helps you, but for conception, first you want to identify the problem or what you're trying to address and figure out what's really needed. And then you want to draft a brief concept paper, which can be very simple. I'll go into that in a moment. And you use that to help recruit team members to discuss that problem or that opportunity. And then you submit a project idea on the MI2 website so that you can gain assistance. And I'm happy to reach out to you and talk to you more about that. So please submit a project, and that'll help me to know what you're working on so I can send you grant opportunities as soon as they're announced and things like that. And the next is planning. So once you've kind of got your team together and you've kind of got an understanding of what you're working on, then you really want to get into planning. And so that's a deeper dive into developing your work plan and your timeline, getting all your goals lined out, getting a clear budget. Then you'll start identifying funding opportunities. So that's especially when it'd be great to reach out to me too. I can help you with that. And then you'll want to revise your concept paper each time that you're going to send it to someone who's in charge of that funding opportunity. This is another thing that I found to be very successful is reach out to the program officer or the person in charge of that funding opportunity with, a one-page concept paper and just schedule a phone call and ask if it's in line with what they're wanting to fund, things of that nature. And the next is just to make sure to read and follow the instructions. It's amazing how many people don't read the grant instructions and they submit things that literally they get tossed out before they ever even get read. So don't waste your time. Make sure to read and follow the instructions. And then the other thing is, if you do get denied for a grant, make sure to request feedback. A lot of these grants happen again, and so you'll just have a stronger application the next time. The next phase is executing. So once you're awarded a grant, one of the first things to do is make sure that you sign all the documents before you ever start a single bit of work, because there's some federal grant opportunities where any work that you do before that contract is signed, they won't reimburse you for it. So make sure that it's all signed before you get started. And then you also want to make sure to clarify all the expectations with that sponsor. And make sure to follow the work plan and the timeline and budget that were in your grant application. And then if any changes are needed, just make sure to contact that sponsor and make sure that you get permission beforehand. And then you'll be monitoring and controlling everything. So you'll be setting up all the methods you need to track and report on your outcomes. There's lots of grants that are paid on a reimbursement basis. Like, I know people would just love to get a $10 million check, but that's very rarely how the federal government works, if ever. So usually what happens is you start the work after you've signed all the paperwork, and then regularly, like maybe every 3 months or 1 month or so, you will submit a reimbursement request and get reimbursed. And then just make sure to be meeting with those key players and trying to make sure all the money gets spent. If your project does get off track, just make sure to take action to correct it and start communicating with that sponsor. And then there's closeout. So then you follow all the sponsor's requirements for that closeout, make sure that you spent all the funds. And occasionally, if you haven't spent all the funds, you can ask for a one-time no cost extension, but you really don't want to do that if at all possible. And then just keep in mind that some grants require long-term reporting. So before you sign the last bit of paperwork to get started, make sure you know how long you're going to have to report. There's some Economic Development Administration grants that require 9 years of reporting. Most grants require just a few, maybe 3, but just keep that in mind. Okay, so just think, where is your project right now in these phases? Is it still in conception? Is it in planning? What should you do next? And so I wanted to go into conception a little bit deeper, just real fast. This is what really has helped a lot of the grants that I've written become successful. It's just writing a concept paper. And a concept paper is not hard and fast. You have to do it a certain way. It's very flexible, but it's just a way to explain a brief summary and who's on the team, why it's important, a description of the project and the impact it's going to have. So if you'd like a template, there's free templates if you follow that link on my blog that you can download. This is also an example of an MI2, one that we use to help recruit partners. It's really good to just keep it brief at 1 page or 2 pages. People don't usually read more than that. Just think of it like a resume, and make sure to tailor it like a resume too. If you're sending it to a different partner, you might want to change a few of the words. Or if you're sending it to a program officer, especially, you want to tailor it to the things that they're interested in. And you just really want to keep it simple. This is another thing that's really helped a lot of the grants that I've written get funded, and it's just contacting that grant program officer. So find out who's in charge of whatever funding opportunity that you're applying for, whether it's a tax credit or anything, and see if you're allowed to contact them. I'd say maybe less than 1% of the time you're not allowed to contact them, so make sure to find out first, but usually they'd like to hear from you. So beforehand, just make sure you've written that concept paper, maybe email it to them and ask if there's a good time to talk. And then here's some questions that you can ask them. I mean, make sure that you're talking to the right person. Ask them if the project that you sent over is in line with the things that they're funding. And sometimes they haven't even actually read the concept paper. They're actually looking at the time that you have the meeting. So just be ready to have like a quick elevator pitch of what it's about, and usually make sure that there's pictures on there as well they can look at. And then just ask, are there any types of trending topics that could make this more competitive? What can improve my chances? And then make sure to follow up afterwards. So here's some common pitfalls that you should avoid. Number 1 is chasing the money. A lot of folks will see a huge $20 million grant or something and they'll want to apply for it, and they're willing to go against the organization's mission, but that will definitely end disastrously. Another thing is just when a grant application is or a grant's announced and you just want to put it together really fast, that's usually not the best way to do it. So make sure that you tried to have your project developed before. The second pitfall is just not doing what you say you're going to do. I love this picture. This is a picture from Backroads of Appalachia. They're a motorsports group in Eastern Kentucky. And you can just tell in this picture that these two people are made for each other. They've got the same priorities in life. They love doing the same things. And just remember that a proposal becomes a promise, right? And so you want to align with that grant funder or that incentive funders, what they prioritize. And just remember that what you say you're going to do in that application becomes a promise, and that they expect you to do what you say you're going to do. And then if you do need to change anything, then you need to discuss it beforehand and make sure that you're changing it and it's mutually beneficial for both of you. The next pitfall is a lack of communication with the sponsor. So you want to communicate with the sponsor often. You want to send them the concept and do a phone call before applying. If you're rejected, you want to ask for feedback. That's one of the best ways to get funding, is just to ask for feedback and go back and apply again. Make sure that before you sign, you clarify expectations and that you are sharing all of your successes and things when you report. And that as issues arise, you're asking the sponsor to get help and correcting it. And then after closeout, just maintain a relationship with them and send success stories to them. The fourth one is compliance issues. So a lot of times folks will forget about reports. So make sure to put that in your calendar so that you make sure that they're always on time. Then not allowing or not following what's allowed. So the link here is to something called ECFR 200. And this is just the Code of Federal Regulations, and it's all about what you can and cannot spend federal money on. And so I seriously doubt any of you want to memorize this huge 1,000-page booklet. So I love this website. You can go in and just type in what you're looking for, and that'll help you to know how you're allowed to spend money, federal money. And the fifth pitfall is just leaving money on the table. Here's a really good example. So I mentioned the Bluegrass State Skills Corporation Grant and Aid program earlier and the stick credit. Well, there was a Kentucky Metals manufacturing company that had paid for training that could be reimbursed by these programs. They had gone through all the paperwork to get this in place, and they were leaving a lot of money on the table. And an organization called BDO helped them recognize this, and now they're helping them identify those issues to help them gain that funding. So I'm actually going to try to get BDO on one of these webinars to help make sure that you guys know how to get all the funding. And this is something different, but I wanted to just mention to you guys, like a pro tip is that leaving money on the table happens quite often. And so even with federal grants, a lot of times someone will have to go ahead and close out their grant with a lot of money they haven't spent. And so those sponsors have to go ahead and spend that money on that purpose that was earmarked. And so a lot of times towards the end of the fiscal year, those grant sponsors will suddenly have a pot of money that they didn't know they were going to have that might meet your needs. And so they might even contact you to apply. So that's why it's important to keep a good relationship with program officers, send them successes so that they begin to trust you. And that way you have that good relationship and they think about you whenever those things happen. All right. So have you guys ever accidentally fallen into one of these pitfalls? It's all confidential. Don't worry. No one's going to know. But I'd like to see if any of you or maybe someone you know has fallen into maybe chasing the money, not doing what you say you'll do in the grant, not communicating with a sponsor, having compliance issues, or leaving money on the table. Everyone thinks that they're not going to leave money on the table, but I tell you what, it sure happens a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised, but I am surprised. But yeah, leaving money on the table is so common. All right, I'll let you go ahead and finish it up a few more seconds. Okay, we'll go to the next one. All right, let's talk about MI2's grants and funding resources. So first, you can join working groups. There's 3 working groups. There's the Talent and Workforce one, Sustainability and Tech Innovation. So if you've got project ideas or you want to meet other people who are doing these types of things, you can definitely reach out to MI2 and join those. And then there's the MI2 Grants webpage where you can submit a project and you can find funding. So if you go to the MI2 website, you can click on grants at the top and then click on submit a project idea. And then there's this really brief form where you can send me a few sentences and a little bit of your contact info so that I can learn about what you're applying for and help you find funding. And if you scroll down to the bottom of the grants page, there's this huge database with over 180 grants and funding opportunities that you can just peruse and see if anything fits, or you can also contact me and I'll help you look through it as well. But this database is really helpful because instead of having to read through hundreds of pages of federal guidance, it's just got simple things like here's the name of the sponsor, here's the name of the program. It has the amount of funding you can apply for, like an overview or synopsis of what the purpose of the funds is for, who's eligible to apply for it. It's got helpful links. And so you can go learn more information. It's got the deadlines. And a lot of times I'll put special notes that can help you understand it more. Yeah. Oh, so all you have to do is type in whatever you want. So if you, on my computer, I can do a Control F for a find. If you have an Apple computer, it might be different, but then you just type in what you're looking for, workforce, innovation, whatever those things are, and it'll help you find the grants that would be good for you. And then, of course, we have some of these 2-page funding summaries on there as well for some of the grants that we're highlighting. So I know we're getting close to the end. I would just like to hear from you guys. What kind of future training would you like to see? Are there any particular topics that you're really interested in? Please let us know for future webinars and training activities. Also, if you know of a certain speaker that you'd like to hear from, put that in here as well. I'd love to connect with them and find out how we can help you guys even more with grants and funding. So if you can just scan that QR code and let me know. How do companies find partners to pursue grants? That's a really good question. I think a really good way might be joining one of the working groups, also contacting me and submitting a project, and then I can help connect you with different folks through MI2